right, so this is, if you're not familiar with this release, it's the Old Fitzgerald from Heaven Hill. It's a 12 or 11-year product, so almost 12 years. And it is a wheated bourbon. If you're unfamiliar with the Fitzgerald line, you know, it goes back to the Stitzel Weller days. It was a brand there. Heaven Hill gets the brand. They talk about how Johnny Fitzgerald was the treasury agent, and he'd pick barrels, you know, this whole story around it. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a wheated bourbon. It does have a big name behind it, or a big brand behind it. And so what the Heaven Hill did was they're releasing it in these glass decanters with the tack strip and everything else. You can kind of see, if you just Google it, you can see it, but really a cool looking bottle. So basically it's 11-year-old larceny, but you know, they're probably picking honey barrels and putting them in this release. It's going to be a continuous release each spring, so it says it'll be for the next 5 years. I'm not sure if that means it'll continue to go up in age, or if it'll just be an 11-year-old product over the next 5 years. But that I'll have to ask them about that. So it's bottled in bond, which means it is has to be distilled from the same season, from the same distillery, and older than 5 years, or excuse me, older than 4 years, and 100 proof. So this was a sample sent from Heaven Hill. You know, always take that into effect for reviews. You know, we talked about that on the round table the other night, about brands sending out honey barrels or honey bottles, whatever you want to call them, for these competitions and everything. They could be doing the same thing. Maybe they send all the media samples that it's the best bottle that they could find. I don't know. That's a little too conspiracy theory. I don't know if they put that much time into it, but always take that into consideration. So haven't even cracked this thing open yet, so I'm going to go ahead and crack it open. It just says made spring 2016, 100 proof, bottled, bottled February 5th, 2018. So here we go. Yeah, Josh, I was surprised. It is I believe it's a 200 milliliter sample. Is that right for this flask size? I think that's right. You know, typically you're getting 50 milliliters to 100 at best, but this one came with a little more. So I was pretty excited about that, because it's hard to get a good read on a bourbon or a whiskey from 50 milliliters. You know, I like to try it a couple times. And with these Facebook Live reviews that I do, I always try to make it the first time I've tried it. So even after I go back and do my full review, sometimes it changes. Sometimes I like it more, sometimes I like it less. But, you know, it's nice to get the initial reaction, because I don't have a good poker face. If I don't like it, it's going to show, and I think that's important to get the initial reaction. So here we go. Ooh. Got a little aggressive in my swirl there. So the initial nose, I'm getting a lot of honey, some of the leather, a little bit of oak, a little spice. Man, it's a lot more leather and kind of like a chewing tobacco. There is some spice and sweetness, but nothing on the initial nose tells me wheated bourbon. So Ryan Cecil asked, how do you have time for live reviews with twins? So you may hear them crying in the background. That's why this is going to be a short review as well. They're basically in our bedroom, and my wife is keeping them quiet for the next 15 minutes. All right. Okay. One thing on the release, so it is set to release this spring and throughout the fall. for the next 5 years. So read into that. I mean, that kind of leaves it, if it's going to be a continuous release, I don't know. It's going to be $110 and should be available soon. We're hitting spring now, so I don't know. If it's $110 and they release 20,000 bottles of it, we'll probably see some on the shelves. If they release 10,000 bottles of it, we'll probably never see it on a shelf, but kind of hard to say. It drinks a little hot. It's definitely spicier than I was expecting and a little hot. There's like some mintiness and some more of that leather, tobacco, those drier notes that I'm not expecting from an 11-year-old wheated bourbon. I'm expecting a lot more sweetness than I'm getting. And, if you're familiar with the Old Fitzgerald or the Larceny, the wheated bourbons from Heaven Hill, they're not nearly as sweet as like a Weller, something from the Weller line from Buffalo Trace with their wheated bourbon, but I don't know. Yeah, it tastes a little thin. It's a little too dry for me, a little too much oak. The finish is very quick and hot. It's with a lot of oak, just a lot of dryness throughout the palate and the finish, which I'm surprised for, to be honest. All right, well, I think about this for a little bit. Let me look at a few of these questions. Let's see here. How do I scroll through? Price point. We got to that. It's $110. See, Ryan says, had this at Heaven Hill Lab. Thought it was good, but yeah, it comes in a really cool bottle. But I mean, I should spend more than 2.5 minutes drinking it before I give my final conclusion. But initially, I'm not overwhelmed or not that impressed. It's a little bit underwhelming. Will this be available at Heaven Hill? It's a good question if it'll be available at the Bourbon Heritage Center. My guess would be yes. They do that a lot with their bourbons. They'll have some kind of release at the Heritage Center. Now, if it's consistently available or just like a one-time where they're trying to get people to camp out, you'll have to ask Kenny from Bourbon Pursuit if he gets his sleeping bag ready. Let's see. They're trying to put Old Fitz back on the map. Yeah, Monty, that's a good point. So it's kind of interesting that so Heaven Hill's had the Old Fitzgerald line since it came from Stitzel-Weller. I don't remember the year, but I think it was early to late 90s. They had it, then there was the Old Fitzgerald Bottled-In-Bond and a few other labels, and they've pretty much pulled back on all of those labels and just moved their wheated bourbon to the Larceny line, which I thought was kind of interesting because there was already a brand behind the Old Fitzgerald name, and now it's making a little more sense because they released the 20-year Old Fitzgerald that was actually Stitzel-Weller bourbon. That was probably two or 3 years ago. And, came in the beautiful case and all that. And now they're releasing this. So I guess they're trying to bring it back around. I didn't understand maybe the idea was to bring it off the shelf for a couple years and then release it at a higher price point. I don't know. I'm not quite sure on that one. Any comparison to Rebel Yell? Yeah, it's similar. I mean, it's the exact same stuff, except a year older. I've had some Rebel Yell barrels that I thought were unbelievable for the $30 price tag, and I've had some that I thought weren't that great. So, very similar though. And at this point, I would compare this to one of the barrels that I didn't think was that great. Let it breathe for 5 minutes. Yes, I completely agree. All right. My brother's on. Maybe we should ask him So Facebook Live now gives a bring the camera or bring them on camera. Jim Murray Whiskey of the Year. I don't think that's what we're headed for. Is there a $40 refundable deposit on the bottle? It should be. You could probably, don't sell your empty bottles, but drill a hole in the bottle and I'm sure somebody will buy it from you. Yeah, man, it drinks like a much older whiskey than 11 years. It just has a lot of spiciness, and I'm kind of looking. I haven't seen any other reviews, so if you know of anyone else who has reviewed it, let me know, because I'd like to see what other people thought now. But a lot of times in these press releases, they'll give their own tasting notes, which I don't like to look at until afterwards, but I'm not seeing any in here. But I'd be surprised if anybody rates this really high. For me, you can still sometimes find Old Fitzgerald Bottled-In-Bond. I think it's just Kentucky only now. It may be a few other states. Or a Rebel Yell 10-year for $30-$40. I'd probably stick with those. Will I buy a bottle if I see it on the shelf? Yeah, I'm a sucker. I will buy a bottle because I love the I love the decanter. The packaging looks incredible. It's probably my favorite actual just bottle and packaging I've seen in quite some time. But I don't know. Maybe that was part of the plan. It's getting a little more toffee. Not much. Still just a little thin. So I'm kind of sticking to my guns on this one. Overall, it's pretty good, but a lot of spice, a lot of oak, a little thin. It's not bad, we're being pretty hard on it, but I think we should at $110. But overall, I don't know, buyer's choice on this one. I can't say, go out and grab a bottle. But I don't want to tell you not to buy it because I probably will too because it looks cool. So that's going to be it for tonight. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll hopefully be back for another live tasting soon. It's been a while, so it's good to be back. Thanks.